The White Sox have left their future vulnerable with the choices they didn't make on Tuesday.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan, been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Elijah Evans of JustBaseball.com joins me today to discuss how much you should buy into the White Sox prospects who had success in the Arizona Fall League, after we talk about how he thinks the White Sox will still be chasing the Tigers even if Tarik Skubal is gone, once Chicago hopefully becomes competitive this decade. But first, let's dive into the White Sox recent roster moves and explore if the club has left itself vulnerable with who they choose not to protect from the Rule 5 draft, and this thinking that the White Sox can revive former top 100 prospects' career. And Elijah, I've been maintaining that the White Sox will be okay with whoever leaves the organization in the Rule 5 draft, but they could have left themselves vulnerable.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Todd. It's always a pleasure talking on the show. I appreciate you having me, first of all. And then, I think, I don't think there's anybody that's like subsequently, super important for the future. With that said, I'm really shocked that Peyton wasn't protected above all else. And I think that maybe you could say the writing was on the wall a little bit when he didn't get a September call up there, given that he had to be added in the offseason anyways, right? So you could say, they already kind of tipped their hand that they don't see him as a key part of the future. My thing is, you look at this roster, even now with Steven Wilson being traded too, like there's 3 guys that have a guaranteed rotation spot or bullpen spot, on this entire roster, right? And Paulette's a guy that transitioned into being a reliever last year after being a second-round pick and had an incredible run last season. Even the start of this season, got to AAA this year, had some ups and downs, but still ran a strikeout rate pushing 30% in AAA at a place where it's hard to pitch, and showed plenty of, intrigue as a decent mid reliever, even if it's not a back end guy, right? I think Paulette would be the 5th or 6th best arm in the White Sox bullpen, like to start the season, honestly, as the roster currently stands. So that's the one where I'm just like, a reliever, and like in the Rule 5 draft too, like you look at around the league, and like a typical target for many teams is just a reliever that has some good stuff and can fill some innings, right? For a lot of teams, they could easily look at Peyton Paulette, a second-round pick former, right? Like they could look at him and say, okay, this is a guy we can put in the, as the last man in our bullpen. We can develop his stuff. We can tweak around with it. He doesn't have to pitch all the time. He can be kind of our innings eater, right? And then maintain control of him for 6 years after that. So I that was the one that really shocked me above all else. There were a couple others that were surprising, but that's the one I really am just having a hard time understanding, honestly.
Yeah, I was surprised too, because also they just don't have a lot of power arms in the bullpen right now. I mean, you got Jordan Leisure, but even then it's like 96, 97. I mean, this is a guy that could legit, if I remember correctly, get to like 98, 99. And they were so excited to get Grant Taylor up, but they don't get Paulette at all during the season when they needed a power arm. So I am surprised. And I do think he's going to be the one drafted. Who else surprised you by, that they didn't put on the 40-man? Because they also had roster spots to work with. I mean, and not that like that you could still non-tender like Hill and even Mike Tauchman to get further down if you still added free agents.
Yeah, there's a number of pitchers too that I think could be in that bucket of somebody you don't really need to extend a contract here, and you could DFA in the offseason. So, and there's still 3 spots on the roster as it stands today. So I know there's moves coming. Of course, they're going to take someone in the Rule 5 draft, the second pick in that. But yeah, the other 2 that stood out to me were Mason Adams and Shane Murphy. Very different types of like figuring out the reasoning. With Adams, while he is probably the best prospect actually of any of the names we've mentioned here, he's coming off of Tommy John. So for a team to get him through the last bit of his recovery and then still have to put him on the active roster after just a couple rehab starts in Charlotte or in AAA potentially for another team, right? Like it's unlikely he gets taken. It wouldn't shock me, honestly. I think there's a world where some team looks at him and looks at what he did in 2024 and says, this is a guy who can be a 5-starter for us this season once he gets healthy. And luckily, because he's coming off injury, at least you have a number of games that can qualify as a rehab start before he has to go onto the active roster due to the rules of the Rule 5 draft, right? So Adams is the most, potentially impactful player in my opinion. But I also think with the injury, that's probably, they probably look at that as the reason why a team won't take him. Murphy is a different situation where he's coming off of the best season in minor league baseball for the White Sox organization on the pitching side, right? This is a guy who had a 1.3 ERA in AA this season. The upside is very limited with Murphy. He tops out at 90, 91. He had great results, and he's a pitch to contact guy that gets outs, but at the same time, he's not necessarily anybody that, He's not someone you're losing sleep over potentially because the upside is capped there. So I can see the reasoning for those two. I still thought there was a very good chance either of those guys would have been added though, because when healthy with Adams and straight off the beginning of the season, frankly, for Murphy, like either one of those guys could get big league innings this inning. So I still was a little bit surprised that neither of them were protected in addition to Paulette.
Can Everson Pereira be saved? And the only reason why I know some of my listeners are like, why are you talking about this guy? I think he's the litmus test for Ryan Fuller and Derek Showman to show that they can actually develop a hitter. Can he be saved? Or even revive reclaim a hitter? Can he be saved?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one for sure. I didn't mind this pickup at all. I thought it was a decent get. I mean, you Gomez and Wilson, like realistically, I don't see either of those guys being part of the true future. I think Gomez showed some things last year. Stephen Wilson's a fine, decent middle inning reliever, but like neither one of those are big pieces here. Pereira is a guy that was like, he was at one point a highly regarded prospect, right? This is not somebody who was just a, we're just going to take a random minor leaguer who's played well, whatever. Like this was a guy who was a top 100 prospect as recent as 2023, right? And 2 years ago, he was looked at as a pretty decently high-end prospect. He made his debut in 2023, played a handful of games for the Yankees, but never quite got it going. But, even this even 24 in AAA, right, had a very good year. This season, he played a number of games at the major league level with Tampa. He played 23 games and also really struggled. But, it's 50 total big league games that he's played in his career for a guy who's still only 24 years old. He's not a guy that's, 27, 28 reclamation project, right? 24-year-old outfielder who has played some center field, looks like he can be, a versatile all over the outfield type of guy. The numbers this year in AAA were still pretty encouraging. The thing with Pereira, I mean, the homers, right? 21 homers this year in AAA. And a guy played all over the outfield too. The aspect that's hard to consider is a 30% strikeout rate at the AAA level. It's tough to get by with that. He got it down a little bit and below 30 in the minors. Up in the big leagues though this year it was 38%. Definitely going to be the biggest concern is, the White Sox are preaching approach, right? Approach has been the talk of the town from Fuller and from a lot of the development staff is continuing to hone in on this plate approach from guys. And this is a guy who, like, the power's there, the EVs are there. I mean, the raw EVs are there. The hard hit rate is high. Like in AAA this year, he ran a hard hit rate pushing, almost pushing 50% in AAA. And even at the big league level, it was over 45% of a hard hit rate. So, there's makings here. It just, the approach is going to have to get better and he's going to have to reduce both the chase and the whiff for sure.
All right. Pereira, because like I've been
searching.
I've been searching YouTube. I've heard Pereira, like, yeah, you can't get a real nailed down.
I could be wrong too.
Yeah, I mean it is like I've like looked at his basically his highlights on YouTube because that's usually what I do with guys that have hard names to pronounce, and it's like I've heard that I'm like I'm just gonna go with that, but I feel like I'm the one podcaster or content guy that is putting maybe too much emphasis. But again, like if 2026 is all about internal improvement, and this guy's a former top 100 prospect, it could go a long way if he could actually turn out to be something to make you feel more comfortable that this rebuild is going somewhere. But obviously, Elijah and I were going to talk more prospects a little bit down in the show. He did make a point on one of his podcasts recently that once the White Sox hopefully become competitive again, they will be chasing the Tigers. And I want to discuss that because I've been maintaining it's the Twins. The NFL season is in full swing, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. I also recently used Game Time to get a great deal on 10 tickets for when Milwaukee took on Los Angeles and Luka Doncic. My brother-in-law, nephew, niece, and their side of the family and I all got a great deal through the app to sit together and watch Giannis and Luka battle it out. Wasn't a headache to find 10 seats close together, and there was a great view of the game. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your audio podcast. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. All right. So why? And the thing is, I do think, smarter people should be on the show to kind of explain certain things when I think certain things. So why are the Sox going to be chasing the Tigers at the end of the decade if Chicago becomes competitive? Because I still think it could be the Twins with their talented crop of in their farm system.
Yeah, the Twins farm is solid too, but the Tigers farm is better, honestly. In addition to the fact that their major league roster is already in a better position, right? The Tarik Skubal situation is complicated, of course. It doesn't seem like they're going to have the money or effort to re-sign him. But with that said, like they're still in a really good spot. They've got building blocks on their roster already. They have a catcher of the future. They have, in Dylan Dingler. They have a bunch of other guys that, and more than anything, like they have two of the best prospects in baseball. Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark are going to be very, very good players. Kevin McGonigal is the number 2 prospect in baseball for Just Baseball and pretty much everywhere, I think. And, is really the best pure hitter in all of minor league baseball. And he's going to be a guy that gets up this year. Max Clark could easily get up in the second half of 2026 as well. And you factor that with, they seem a little more willing to spend. I mean, I don't think they're going to spend Skubal money, but I think they are more keen on going in on this current core they have than the rest of the AL Central, right? The Guardians are never going to spend. Kansas City spending a little more, but I don't love this. Their farm's in a rough spot, honestly. They've got some building blocks, but they still have a lot of things to piece together there. Obviously, we're hoping the White Sox will spend in future years, but we haven't seen it yet. And Detroit is the one team where I think the blend of current major league talent and, what they have coming up in the farm, and it's not just the guys I mentioned off the top there. Bryce Rayner is another very exciting prospect. Josue Briseño is their catching prospect who could easily be another, a platoon catcher, first base guy for them in the future. So I just think the Tigers are in a good spot overall where they've got a good blend of major league talent, minor league system, willingness to spend a little bit of money as things get going.
Is it possible to even have a 3-team race? Because again, the Twins, they've got, a highly considered prospect, Walker Jenkins, all those guys. They make those trades at the trade deadline to really improve their farm system. Could it be a potential 3-team race like we saw in 2006? Although I think you were like in diapers.
It's possible. That is not quite, but yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely possible. That's the thing. I think the Twins are in a good spot too, farm system wise. The thing with them is they're just so far off. They blew it up. They just blew it up, right? So like the Twins, I think they're on a, hypothetically, maybe not exactly, but they should be even a year behind where the White Sox are just because of their timeline of what they just finally moved off a lot of their core pieces. They still have a Buxton to move potentially, a Joe Ryan to move potentially, right? So their farm could get really good really quickly. You move Joe Ryan and Brian Buxton, and they could be looking at 8, 9 top 100 prospects potentially, right? Because they've already got 5 guys who are on the list now. They've got a number of others who are kind of entering that tier. So I think with them, like they definitely could be. I just think they're still a few steps away comparatively to the Tigers, but I agree with you. They could easily be in that mix in a couple more years from now.
What about the Tigers pitching? How does that match up to the White Sox pitching prospects? Because my guy, Justin Latta from Locked On Guardians, he's kind of been down on there whenever I've talked to him off, in our meetings and stuff like that, when we have our water coolers and stuff. He's kind of been, and that's why I wanted to get you on too, because I've been hearing different stuff about the Tigers. And I do think it's important to know that, we're all hoping the White Sox are going to be competitive by the end of the decade. And there's going to be, competition, obviously, for the division. Who would that be? So that's why I'm just kind of fascinated with your take on the Tigers, because I've been hearing that their prospect, their pitching is just terrible in terms of prospects.
They're going to have to spend. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. We saw Troy Melton in the playoffs a little bit. I don't know how much you watch that ALDS, but Troy Melton's a beast. Troy Melton's going to be legit. We saw some flashes of it already in his career, but I think now we really saw in the playoffs like that he can be a legit starter for them. Obviously, the dream is if they extend Tarik Skubal and they just give him all the money that he wants, then they're in a really good spot. I don't see that happening. That's the unfortunate reality. So I do think that they're going to have to spend on some pitching. I agree with you. The pitching it's a weaker system comparatively to the Sox, compared to to some other teams as well. They're going to have to spend on a couple pitchers. And I think they seem willing to. That's the thing. When you have an already talented offensive team and 4 elite offensive hitting prospects that are going to be up in the next couple of years, right? I think that's where you can say, okay, we got to get an acer. We got to get a starter or two that we really can pencil into the rotation. So yeah, you're 100% right. Their pitching side is definitely the bigger question mark, but I do think they're going to show some willingness, given how much depth they have on the offensive side, to actually spend on some arms.
One organization, though, that keeps staying competitive because of the pitching they develop is Cleveland. Is that eventually going to run out of, will that clock eventually run out on them?
No. I don't think so. I wish I could say yes. I wish I could for the sake of White Sox fans, but Cleveland just has a knack for finding guys and turning them into the best versions of themselves. Right now, their system is actually stronger on the hitting side. They've got 5 hitting prospects that are top 100 right now for just baseball, and only 1 on the pitching side. They've got some really impressive bats, coming up and on the way for them. So they're going to be interesting because you look at that roster and you say, okay, it's been in offensively, they still did good this year, and they still made the playoffs this year, and it was really just Jose Ramirez at times. Like there was nobody else other than Jose Ramirez and Stephen Kwan that were doing anything on the offensive side of the ball for them for large portions of the season, and they still made the playoffs. You add the fact that they have 3 or 4 prospects who are going to be on their big league roster this year and could be, already the 3rd, 4th, 5th best hitters on that team potentially. Then you get an interesting situation because they do have some pieces coming in the pitching. They continue to turn guys into the best version of themselves on the pitching side. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a couple of their, decent pitching prospects develop into more than that at some point soon.
Do you expect the Royals then down the road to eventually fade off, or can they ride Bobby Witt Jr. as long as they can?
This is the division. Like people love to just bash on the AL Central, and like I get it to an extent because they are cheaper teams. They're teams that don't spend as much. They're teams that don't have the flash often, other than obviously Bobby Witt. But like the Royals aren't bad either. The issue with the Royals is the farm is rough these days. The Royals farm system is not in a great position. I think they're in a spot where they're going to really have to Carter Jensen, who just came up at the end of the year, their top catching prospect and their only top 100 prospect at all, is a beast. He's going to be he could be one of the better catchers in the league in a couple of years from now. Beyond him, there's a lot of nothing too exciting or nothing too trustworthy potentially on their farm system side. So you've got Bobby Witt. Obviously, you've got, Cole Reagans and a couple other fun pitchers. Vinny Pasquantino had a big year. Carter Jensen, I think, is going to be very good. There's not quite enough depth on either side of the ball for me in terms of when you future project the Royals.
I like that you bring that up because one of the things to help you get better is you got to have prospects that other teams want. And if it sounds like the Royals don't have that, it's going to be hard for them to make moves, and that type of stuff. So if Detroit, though, and Minnesota and Cleveland continues to build up more depth, then that makes it more, important for the White Sox to also build up a farm system that continues to have depth and that other teams want, because then you can make trades that put you over the top.
Yeah, no, 100%. You got to be able to capitalize. And I think the White Sox, they're not there yet, but at some point you'd hope the White Sox get to a place in a year or two from now where some of the depth spots that they have, you can capitalize on some of those prospects and cash in on them eventually. Right now, you got to maximize talent. And that's why I've been very anti the whole idea of trading one of the catchers and all these things. It's just like, they're not there yet. I don't think it's time to consider trading any of the young guys right now. In a year or two from now, if you really feel confident in the depth you have in one area of the ball, okay, maybe then you look into some of these prospects, right? Right now, it's too early. You're not good enough yet, honestly.
Yeah, you're in asset acclimation mode and not asset even multiplication mode right now.
Exactly.
We're going to talk more about those assets after the break because the White Sox got some great performances from key prospects in the Arizona Fall League. So let's discuss, though, how much stock that should be taken into that, and that's coming up after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you, FanDuel's traditional money lines, over-unders, and spreads, they are fun to play. But if you want to win some big-time money, or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. Think the Bulls can ride this good start to an unexpected 50-plus win season? Well, that's at plus 490 the last time I checked. So you could turn possibly as little as $10 into $49 if it does happen. Say you're more realistic and you think the Bulls will do what they normally do, and that is they have over 40 wins and make the play-in game. Well, you can combine that into a parlay to increase the potential of a better payout if that does happen. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Hope you have a good weekend as well. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts. As the show's available on all major podcast platforms. Here with Elijah Evans of Just Baseball. And again, where should they be subscribing to your podcasts? You're on mute.
And I'm muted. You can find me at the Future Sox podcast, where we talk White Sox prospects and all things White Sox. The call up for MLB prospects around the league.
All right, so hey, I want to get into the Arizona Fall League in that, sometimes you want to pump the brakes because again of how it's a very hitter friendly league.
Yeah.
But Hagen Smith, boy, was he impressive. Does this renew hopes that he could be an ace someday?
For me, I'm not taking a ton away from Higgins' performance. I think it was good to see him just get some innings under his belt, throw some strikes, be effective with it. For me, the biggest thing for him is just continual command, right? We saw his velo tick up a notch, which was good to see for sure. But even in this league, like you mentioned, it is pretty hitter friendly, and there is a lot of that. But there's also a lot of young hitters that swing a lot, and you saw him get probably some whiffs and some swings on stuff that he wouldn't be getting at the higher levels of the minors or even at the major league level, obviously, right? So my thing with him is like it really just comes down to how much you can pound the zone. And the other thing with Arizona, like he start to throw the changeup a little bit. We got a couple games of some decent changeup usage, but I was really hoping we were going to get 20+% of not fastball slider, just because there still is a question of, does he have any third pitch that he trusts at all? And we had a couple games of it, but generally speaking, it still was pretty fastball slider heavy, and a decent amount of pitches that were out of the zone that might have got swings in Arizona, but probably wouldn't at the big league level. So it was good to see. It was a step in the right direction for sure. But I still have questions regarding the command and particularly the ability to throw a third pitch at the big league level.
All right. I remember seeing a tweet about Caden Connor from you. He did have a really good, obviously, Arizona Fall League, but what should we really realistically expect of him if he ever makes it to the major league level?
Yeah, no, I talked with Caden a few weeks ago, and he's a good dude, and he's played really well in the Arizona Fall League, and he's got some versatility, right? He's shifted into more of a full-time outfield role. Coming up out of college, he was more of a corner infielder, played some third, some first, a little bit of outfield, but now he's shifted truly into a right field, left field, kind of corner outfield spot. And he had a great fall. Yeah, he had a great fall overall. He was really solid. His plate approach is excellent. I think that's the thing, that the hit tool and the plate approach with that guy doesn't strike out much. He's going to draw a ton of walks, right? He's going to get you on. He's going to get on base at a good clip. All things considered, probably more of a big league bench utility piece if he makes it to the bigs, right? I think he made it to AAA at the end of the season, so I think he'll start in AAA again alongside some of the other names that were in the AFL. But once he, when the time comes, I think he's probably a filler guy who fills in some innings, or he could earn himself a bench role in the future. It's definitely not a big league starter profile by any means, but the plate approach is great, and that's one thing that it never hurts off the bench to have a guy who's got some decent contact and can draw some walks, right?
Yeah, and I like that. That's why I wanted to ask you that question. And I like that tweet that you had, because I remember seeing like some people getting very excited about him, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's pump the brakes. And people hit
Yeah.
well, but Braden Montgomery, he definitely hit well. But so the one thing that I was thinking is, does this maybe shorten how long he's going to stay in the minors, or does this even give him a shot to start at AAA? Because I don't think the front office is going to be like, hey, Braden Montgomery raked like Colson did in the Arizona Fall League. Let's make him compete for the starting right fielder job. But does this maybe move his timeline up a little bit more? Kind of like what they did with Colson Montgomery, kind of what they're thinking?
It's 12 games. I don't think it changes much. I think that you wanted to see Braden. The expectation is that you would see a healthy Braden rake at the Arizona Fall League. He's a first round pick. He's dominated the SEC in baseball. Like, he was great last season when he was healthy, right? Like, the hope and expectation was he would dominate. He only played 2 weeks there because he was coming off the foot injury in Birmingham, right? Maybe he starts in Charlotte. I still think he starts in Birmingham. And I don't think there's any rush with this guy. There's no rush. At the end of the day, like, there's pre-deadline, in my opinion, doesn't really make sense. And that's assuming Luis Roberts stays on the roster, right? Assuming Luis Roberts on the roster. The other thing with Braden that's interesting is he played center field pretty much the entire time in Arizona. So as much as he's always kind of been penciled as this guy's going to move to right field, here we are, and he's playing center field still frequently. So there's a good chance the White Sox view him as the just slot in for Luis Robert when Luis Robert is eventually traded, whenever that may be. But even if Luis Robert were to get moved sooner than we expect, I still don't think Braden is up till at least deadline time. I don't see any reason to push it quicker. And especially if he's going to be playing center field, get him more center field reps in the minors and let him really develop there, potentially, if you're going to try to make him a center fielder at the big league level.
Sam Antonacci, he hit well, but he always hit well. I mean, he hit well in the minors. So how much did that additionally hitting well put pressure on Chase Mydroth to put up a good bat-to-ball skill season next year?
Yeah, I mean, Antonacci's been, you've heard me say it, I've been on the show before and said it, like, he's one of my favorite prospects in the system. He's been for a year and a half now, I since the draft and since his first handful of professional games. Like, I've been very in on the profile and what he brings to the table. I think the swing is one of the more stable, consistent swings in the farm system, if not the best, honestly. Antonacci was great again. It didn't change my perspective on him because he already was great and already someone that we were kind of viewing as a key piece. But I mean, the dude hit 378 and had an on-base percentage over 500. I mean, it's a continuation of what was an incredible season for him at the plate. And I don't think he breaks camp, but he's going to start in AAA. He did enough. He doesn't need to show anything else in double. And if he starts in trips and he starts out the season hot, like, I don't think it's crazy to think Antonacci could debut as soon as May or June, potentially, if things go well for him, because, there's not a lot for a guy like that to prove. Yeah, you want to see more power. Okay, he kind of got into some more power in the AFL. I mean, that was one good takeaway is he had an opposite field left center homer, which you don't see a ton from a guy of this stature. You saw some good EVs flash. He popped at almost a 107 home run in the AFL. So, there's reason to believe he can be up in the bigs soon, and where that works out defensively, we'll see. He's played mostly second this year in Arizona, right? So that puts some pressure on Chase Meidroth for sure. He also has experience playing third. He played third throughout college and even in the minors a little bit. So I could easily see him getting some reps early on at third if Vargas ends up playing more first, right? There's a lot of ways to go with it, but one thing for sure is that Antonacci is quickly gaining steam in the system.
And also then when you're saying third, because the only reason why I still think ideally would be second, just because like you said, with the power not being totally there, like maybe 10, 15 most. But then again, Miguel Vargas is probably a 10, 15 unless he really bulks up. But another guy that it just came to my mind that might be put on blast too is Curtis Mead. Sam Antonacci, is he going to push both of these guys to maybe they have to have good spring trainings and good regular seasons, unless or they've got, because they may have their guy. And again, the White Sox do need a good bat to ball profile. They need at least three of those guys in the most ideal lineups at right field.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think he's gonna really push some things, and the infield gets crowded pretty quickly, honestly. And that's why, as much as I think it'd be cool to add a true corner infielder in free agency, I can see why the White Sox may not go that direction because of the depth of the infield. They do have some more depth in the infield, and especially than the outfield. Obviously, there's pretty much no prospects knocking on the door on the outfield side of things, right? So in the infield, you've got a couple guys coming up. Antonacci's definitely going to get some innings one way or another, and his profile is that leadoff hitter type of mold. I mean, he's the type of guy you'd want leading off for this team. And the other aspect of Antonacci's game that neither Meidroth or Mead feature is he's a bag stealer, man. He stole 11 bases in the AFL after stealing over 40 during the regular season this year in the minor leagues. So this is a guy who, he's not the best raw speed. He is a fast guy, but like, he has a quick twitch. He's good on the bases. He has good instincts. Like, this guy's going to steal 25 plus bags at the big league level. So, I think there's a lot to like in this profile, especially from the left side, right? It's just going to be interesting to see kind of how quickly he pushes the agenda. He'll still probably spend a decent amount of time in AAA, but you never know.
All right. I know I'm going to go over the time here, but I do want to ask one final question, because you did mention the depth in the infield. Why does this team or this organization resist so much letting guys play different positions? Like William Bergoya, he can run a little bit. Why is he not in the outfield, maybe in the center of that? Is it because of the hit profile, or even Jarrell Perez? To me, that might be a good, left fielder of the future. You just don't have a lot of outfield depth, but you have all these guys in the infield that promise to at least make it to the big leagues. Why are they not giving them outfield gloves?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a good question. I don't know exactly what the planning there is. These guys are really young. You got to remember some of these guys. I mean, Bergoya and Perez are both 21 years old. Like, they're still very early in their careers. Also pretty small guys. Perez and Bergoya are both 5'8", 5'9" tops. So I'm not sure exactly if that's part of the logic there. I just think it's like, you want to develop these guys as best as possible, and you want to throw them as little like turbulence to their development track as you can. And maybe that's sticking them at their current positions for now. You never know what that could happen from there. I mean, Antonacci's a guy that I think is athletic enough to go to the outfield. Then again, he's played a pretty solid, he's shown to be an average or above average defensive second baseman. And even at third base, he's been pretty satisfactory there as well. So, it's a trade-off. It's a tricky thing to figure out, but at some point, yeah, there's going to have to be some outfielders aside from Braden Montgomery that take a step forward in the system, or guys that end up moving out there from the infield.
Yeah, or like even Brian Ramos, they really did not have him play much outfield. Like, what is he only played like 4 games at AAA Charlotte?
Yeah, played a couple games, yeah.
Where it's like he still has a little bit of promise. I mean, he's not, Jairo Uriarte where you want to be out on him like that. But Ramos, it's just like, why didn't he not play? So that's just something that's perplexed me. And I know you've talked to a lot of the prospects on that. I was just wondering if you had some insight on that, because it's like, why don't we have these guys learn these different positions when the games don't matter? Right. Or at least even next season in 2026 when you're not expected to wins and losses, because I just never want to live another Gavin Sheets or Andrew Vaughn trying to play the outfield ever again.
No.
Well, that wraps up this.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. I'll be back on Monday to finally tackle why I think it would be criminal to trade Kyle Teal this offseason. You can leave comments about today's episode on the episode page on YouTube via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox, @ToddJDub. Check out Elijah Evans' work at where?
You can find me at justbaseball.com, the Call Up Podcast, Future Sox Podcast, at Elijah EV8 on X as well.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day. Have a great weekend. Talk to you Monday.